I'm really excited to have the opportunity to talk to you all today about something that is really communications and relationships, and those things are always challenging anytime, but in the times that we're in right now, it's even more so. It's really we're all trying to figure out how to do what we've been doing for so long, and do it in this virtual. Important to have effective communication at any time, but once we're all of a sudden we're all in different locations, it becomes even more critical to work on those relationships and deepen the relationships, because people in a lot of different ways, and the communication should always be a priority between management and their teams. But when we're remote working, that need is even more magnified than ever. And as Larry said, as we go through this, and to manage those and answer any questions that you have this morning. So we'll go ahead and move on through this. When we're from a distance, it's even more important to stay connected, and we have to figure out that in a good way that's productive and helps people continue to feel like they're part of a team and that they belong somewhere. Emails and text messages, they have their purpose, and they're good for their purpose, but they're not to be too much. Video conferencing, like we're doing now with Zoom or one of the other platforms, excellent tools to use that we have available to us. But then if we want to take it to another level with our team, we can use some of the tools like Slack or some of the alternatives to Slack for collaborating in a more social way. There's Microsoft Teams and the G Suite and Google Chat and Glip and FlowDoc, and there's several others that you can choose from. So you find the one that works best for you. But there are ways that we can stay connected, and we need to make sure that we're doing that as we're all pretty isolated. But remember, when we're communicating like this in this virtual environment, we lose a great deal of what is considered the most important part of communication, and that's our body language. When we think of communication, you may have heard about the 3 V's of communication. We have verbal, vocal, and visual. Verbal are the words that we use. Vocal is the tone that we use, our pace, our volume, our vocal variety that we have. And those things are important. But the most important thing, by so many experts, says that our body language is the most important part of our communication. And just so we're missing a lot of the gestures a lot of times, and the posture, and really what's somebody looking like when they're talking with us. We're kind of a bunch of talking heads for the most part, but our body language is really important, and we're missing so much of that whenever we do this kind of communication. So we need to make sure that we're making in the vocal part of our conversation and our communication, because it's much more important that we use those, that we're more attentive to those things in our words and our vocal variety. And so the better that we're able to connect with one another, the stronger when we can be open and honest with each other. But it takes an investment from each of us, an investment of time, investment of energy, and it's a willingness to be open and vulnerable and present ourselves as our most authentic self. And that's not always the easiest thing to do. Here's a plan for this morning, what we'll be going through, and we'll talk about improving our emotional intelligence, our EQ, as you may have heard it referred to before, because the better our emotional intelligence is, the better off our relationships will be. We'll look at a 6-step strategy to make your connections deeper and more authentic, and some networking in a virtual world. We'll look at some tips for that, and then we'll spend some time on conflict and how do we think about conflict and how do we approach it, and can we actually make it more productive? And that answer is yes, we can, and so we'll spend some time on that. When we think about our strongest relationships, and we're going to have some interaction here, so I'm going to ask you all to spend some time and have some input into the chat window, which is at the bottom, and I assume it's at the bottom of your machine that you're working on. But when you think about your strongest relationships, they can be either professional or personal. What are the quality traits do they have that make them your strongest relationships? So if you would just take a few minutes, or take a couple minutes and type some comments in there. What are the qualities and traits that those have? Honesty, feeling I can trust them. Thanks, Kaylin. Trust, yes. Honesty and authenticity. Eye contact. Visibility. Familiar. Non-judgmental. That's a good one, John. Transparency. Like that. Empathy. Penny. Some good responses there. Confidentiality. Thanks, Tony. It goes right there with trust, doesn't it? Oh, Larry, I like that. Having my best interest at heart. We'll be talking about that, being very you-centered, you-focused, not about me. So that's great. Good responses, Corolla. Following up on what they say they will do. Ah, yes. Do what they say they do. Goes along with integrity. Also part of our topics today. Good listener. Beautiful. Great responses. I appreciate you all participating there. Very nice. So some of the characteristics that I think about are mutual respect. When we hold each other in that high regard, and we know that we're not going to let each other down, that we can depend on each other, and it's so important. And empathy, somebody put empathy in there. That's one of my very important ones, where you can put yourself in their shoes to better understand where they are coming from. It's so easy to get caught up in our own world and be in our own little whirlwind of craziness going on and not think about the other one. But everybody's got their own stuff they're dealing with, especially these days. So how can you put yourself in their shoes? So spend some time with that. And then trust, also one of my very important ones. And to me, this is the foundation of a strong business relationship, or any relationship, honestly. And I think of it as vulnerability-based trust, where you're willing to be open and transparent and vulnerable with them. That you know, in this relationship, that you know that you can each present yourselves to them openly, honestly. You don't have to have any walls up, no shells around you, that you trust that they will accept you the way you are and for who you are and how you think and how you feel. And then to trust the intent of the other. It's very easy when we're in these interactions with people that somebody can do something or say something, and we see this all the time now. We see it so much on social media and throughout the world now, that people assume the worst. They assume the worst intentions of people, and all that does is just create more divisiveness and more negativity. And so I always want to trust the intent of the other. I assume good intent. I think that most normal people don't wake up in the morning and say, what can I do today that's going to go and tick off Jeffrey or Corolla or somebody? How can I just really ruin their day? I don't think they're going to do that. Normal people don't do that. So trust the intent of the other person. And somebody said something about putting the other person first. So they're thinking about me. So it's the you first mindset, where you're in this relationship, and it's not about me. It's that whole, we all heard that before, the radio station, WIIFM, what's in it for me, but you want to make it about them, what's in it for them. And then engagement, the being committed to investing in this relationship. I mentioned earlier, but it does take investment of time and energy to grow this relationship. And then integrity, that was on our list also. Operating consistently by the principles and the moral compass that we claim to have. And I say claim to have because we now know people that they claim to have these particular values or this moral compass, and their actions don't reflect that. So they're out of integrity with that. And then support and perspective to hold each other up and to help them see how others see them. Because it's especially now when if we're working at a home office and we're not getting feedback and the good rapport with people. So it's easy to wonder, does it matter? Is my work important? Does anybody care? And so we need to make sure that people understand and feel what other people feel about them, to know that they're valued and respected, and they're very important for the process. So when we look at the values of the strong business relationship, what are the things we get from it? We end up with this more rewarding work environment. The ideas that are generated and shared, we get more of those because we have that vulnerability-based trust. And when we have that trust in place, people are more willing to put their ideas on the table because they have a trust that they're going to be looked at and accepted and evaluated. And if it's a bad idea, okay, nobody's going to beat you up over it, and you're not going to get in trouble for it. So people will put things out there and know that they're not going to be slammed for it. So feedback is more honest and useful. Same thing when you have that trust, because we have this negative connotation about feedback that it's a bad thing. But feedback doesn't have to be a bad thing, but we have this concept of feedback is negative. So, but it is more honest and useful because we know, again, we're going back to assuming good intent from that feedback. And it's a sense of community. We get such a greater sense of community when we have these things going on. And obviously it's going to improve our productivity, and the teamwork is going to grow from that as well. So when we think about actions that we can take to improve our business relationship, we can enhance our emotional intelligence, our EQ. And it's not one of those things that you either have it or you don't. You can improve on it. You can take what you have and work on yourself. And I always think spending time working on ourselves is time well invested. But you can improve your emotional intelligence then you want to make authentic connections. Again, when you're making connections and starting to build those relationships, be you. Be who you are and let them see who you are, because who you are is so much better than any fake version of you that you could present to somebody. Because then when you're being who you are, you're going to be more open, you're going to be more approachable to them, and they're not going to wonder, who is this person really? And then you want to build mutual respect, but you have to earn the respect first. And you earn the respect by having the trust and doing those things where you're focused on them and not so much you. And then when you have the conflict, because conflict is inevitable, we're going to have that you handle the conflict the right way, and then you make it as productive as possible. When we talk about emotional intelligence, what is emotional intelligence? Again, I'll ask you to go into to the chat and put 2-3 words in there. What do you think? How would you define emotional intelligence? It's not always so easy to define. It's kind of this thing that everybody talks about. If you would just go into the chat and put a comment in there, what you think emotional intelligence is. Being reflective. Good, John. Real good. Awareness of your and others' feelings. Being grounded enough to listen. Understanding my emotional wake. Oh, I like that. My emotional wake. That's a good one. Introspective. Understanding how people's emotions are affected by your actions. Very nice, Corey. Thank you. We'll take just another few seconds on that. Knowing how to manage emotions. Nice, Rodolfo. Thanks. Tony, ability to connect on a non-analytical level. I like that. Self-control, yes. And Gary, I'm impressed by your answers, that you're impressed. Very nice. Thanks for the cooperation again, y'all. Yeah, so emotional intelligence is one of those things that, not everybody has a good handle on, but really some really good responses there. And when we think about what emotional intelligence is, then it's really some of what you all said. We recognize, understand, and manage our own emotions. First things first, we gotta be able to manage our own emotions. But then how do we recognize, understand, and influence the emotions of others? Because we can influence the emotions of others by how we interact with them. And just having some awareness of what our emotions do and how they affect our behaviors and how they impact people both positively and negatively. So your choice, you get to choose how you impact people by your emotions, and we can control our emotions. We don't always get to control what happens to us and what we think, but we control how we respond to it. And then how do we manage those emotions when we're under pressure? Because that's when the going gets tough, is when we get under pressure. So why would I need to manage my EQ, or when would I need to manage it? So when I'm giving and receiving feedback. Again, that negative connotation that we have with feedback, emotions get worked up, and so we need to be able to manage those tight deadlines that somebody gives us that may or may not be reasonable, or we may or may not have managed our time very well. And even if it's self-induced that we put ourselves in this jam, I've got a problem, and our emotions naturally get worked up. And in dealing with those challenging relationships, I'm sure nobody here has any challenging relationships in their work life or personal life either way, but the emotions get involved, things get worked up, and then not having enough resources, people, money, time. You've got to have what you have. Otherwise, again, the stress and the pressure builds up and the emotions get involved. And then dealing with change. So when dealing with change, that's something that we're all doing a lot of right now. And I think this is one of the bigger ones. And it's not low on the list because of priority or anything, but dealing with change right now is something that we're all, I think I see a lot of emotion in the world these days, where people take a stand and they're putting themselves out there, and you see it all on social media and in on the news and interviews and things like that. But the people are putting themselves out there in a very judgmental way because other people are not reacting to change the same way that they are. They're not dealing with it the same, and so if they're not dealing with it the way I do, they must be wrong. But everybody deals with this differently. And everybody has different levels of emotional intelligence too, into how they're managing their emotions. And then dealing with setbacks and failures, we all have failures and setbacks, and it gets emotional and gets challenging. So there are plenty of times, plenty more than this, that we would need to manage our emotional intelligence. Now, when we think about our emotions, we feel before we think. That's how our brains work. In our In our brain, we have our amygdala. It's a really small part of our brain, but it goes back to, it's the emotional part of our brain. You know, when it's triggered, it releases chemicals that shoot through your body. It's that adrenaline and the cortisol. Our blood flows faster and our heart races and our breathing shortens. And sometimes you'll even hear your voice will start to tighten up. Anybody ever have, you get in that stressful situation, your emotions get caught up, and all of a sudden you sound kind of all pinched off and like you can barely even get air out of your lungs. It's that fight or flight that's innate as human beings. We have that fight or flight reflex. So when that amygdala is triggered, you know, it reduces the amount of working memory that we have available in our neocortex, and that working memory for your computer type. So that's like the RAM part of your brain. So it stops complex thought. Has anybody ever said to themselves, I was so angry I couldn't think straight? Well, it's true. It's because it's exactly what's happening. You know, the amygdala hijacks that thinking mind. And then after the fact, after things have calmed down a little bit, then we come up with those better responses that we could have and should have had in the situation. But once our brain is hijacked, our thinking mind is hijacked by the amygdala, then all bets are off. When we get triggered emotionally, our decision-making process can fail us, and we make some bad choices. We respond to an email before we should have responded to it. We reply all when we really didn't need to reply all. It probably could have gone to just one person, but it causes a lot of problems. You know, we tend to have that, you know, I'm rubber and you're glue and everything you say, and you guys know the rest of that. But it's, you know, we do these things that are just really unhealthy for us in a lot of ways. So what do we do when we're triggered? There's some steps you can take. First thing is to stop. When you're triggered, and you know when you're triggered, and it happens like that, you get triggered, you get to make a choice. You can just keep barreling forward into what you're feeling already, but you need to stop. Take a pause and disconnect from that trigger. Take a drink of water. Thank you very much. Open your palms. Think about when you get worked up. A lot of times you start to get like this. You don't get into a fist necessarily. You might, but your hands tend to kind of claw up a little bit. So open those palms and just let your palms get flat. Not have a fist. And if you're on a Zoom call like this, you know, then excuse yourself for just a minute, mute yourself, and stop your video, and just turn it off for a minute. Then come back. But don't let it just take you down that path, barreling down that path. And then you want to breathe. Take a deep, conscious breath. It helps those chemicals that we released into our body to start to recede from the brain, and it minimizes the impact that they're going to have on us. And then we want to ask, what will serve me best in this situation? And what do I really want to happen? What do I really want? Is it the most important thing for me to be right now? Is that really the most important thing? What do I really want from this? So those are 3 steps you start with. And then, but take responsibility for your emotions and your ability to respond to those emotions. So instead of saying, he's making me mad, we've all said that. Oh, she makes me so mad. He makes me so mad. We've all said that. But what happens when we do that? We have given up control of our emotions. So why do you want to give somebody else the ability to control your emotions? Because can somebody really make you mad? I say no. It's a choice, because if I did something and it made this person mad over here, but it didn't make this person mad, well, then obviously I don't have that ability to make somebody mad. They chose to be mad. They chose not to be mad. It is a choice that we make. So instead of saying he's making me mad, just say, I don't like what he's doing and I am getting mad. And that's okay. It's a choice. You choose, but then get past it. But notice the other person's feeling also. Develop a better understanding of how that person's feeling. Again, going back to putting yourself in their shoes and having that empathy. Everybody has a story in the situation. You're seeing it from your side, they're seeing it from their side. So how can you put yourself in their shoes? Think about what they're feeling. How does that emotion that they're feeling right now influence their behavior and their perceptions? Because it is affecting them. And then take some time to reflect. At the end of the day, or even after the end of a particular interaction, look back at that and say, what did I do well in that interaction? And what can I do differently? What areas can I work on to maybe do that better next time? Let's move on to the 6-step strategy for making connections deeper and more authentic. Because it is, if you have these shallow, superficial relations, then that's all they're going to be, and you're not going to grow from them, and they're never going to be much of anything of value to either one of you, quite honestly. Make the conversation about them. We've already touched on this already. It's all about you. You know, let me ask you. I want to talk about you. Tell me about you, because we all know people that their favorite topic is themselves, and that's honestly probably the majority of people, and that's okay. But whether your audience is 1 or 100 or 1,000, focus on what their needs or wants are. and then be fully present with them. Give them your full attention like there's nobody else in this world that matters. And we all know people like that, and we've heard of people like that. We've heard of famous, political figures and things that people say, think what you might about their politics, but when they're with this person, they make them feel so important because they feel like I'm the only person in the world. And man, if you can make somebody feel like that, well, they'll vote for you if that's important to you. But you're going to deepen that relationship to an unbelievable level. And then actively listen, really listen to understand about them and what's going on in their life. If you approach the conversation with, how can I help this person? Well, then all of a sudden you have a goal. You have a goal for that conversation. And for those goal-oriented people, having a goal, it gives you something to work towards in that conversation. And then they'll genuinely listen and build trust along the way. Be curious. Ask questions so that you more fully understand where they're coming from, what they're saying, as opposed to providing. If they're telling you something, are you going to give them the answers and give the solutions? They're probably not looking for answers or solutions unless they ask you for those. But don't inject your ideas into the conversation. Just ask them questions so that you can, again, it's going to get you more empathy so you can feel more what it's like to walk a mile in their shoes. Give evidence. Demonstrate that you've heard them by paraphrasing and repeating back what they've said to you. And this goes back to communication 101 and sales 101. It's just making sure that the communication is open, because there's a two-way responsibility on communication from the giver and the receiver to make sure that the communication actually happened. And then finally, have a servant's heart. And I know around the North Dallas Chamber, man, we are loaded up with people that have a servant's heart, which I love. And that's what I love about being around the group from the Chamber. And it's just so many people just giving to each other, but look for opportunities to be of service to them and how you might be able to help them. And show genuine concern for them and their success and their happiness. So when you can do that, then people just, when you walk into the room and that's the person that you are, you have the servant's heart, you change the dynamic of the room when you walk in. And probably everybody on this call right now can think of at least one person that does that. When they walk into a room, they change the dynamic. How about you be that person? I think that's a good idea. So networking in a virtual world, challenging, but it's doable. It's totally doable, because honestly, a lot of what we do in our normal networking is virtual until it's not, until we get that face-to-face with somebody. Then we go to a chamber event or some other networking event or something. So, but a lot of it's virtual leading up to that. So a lot of the strategies actually continue to work. You just do them differently. We just don't always get that end product of being able to sit down face-to-face with somebody, and that's okay. But having a strategy going in is really important. So, because it's that whole thing, if you're driving around and you don't know where you're going, then any road will take you there, right? So plan ahead and get a strategy in place. So think about the people that you already know, and then the people that you might want to know. Right now, how engaged are you with them? Have you reached out to them in the last 2-3 months when all this craziness is going on? I know I've received multiple calls, texts, emails from people that are they're just checking in, and I've done the same myself. Because we're so disconnected right now. People are worried about the people they care about, and so this is a huge caring and showing love to the people that are important to you, that you're thinking about them. So reach out to them, connect with them, invite them to what I call a Zoom coffee break. Just find some time. You have 30 minutes. Tomorrow morning, we can sit down and have a cup of coffee and on Zoom. You don't have to drink coffee if you don't want to. It's not required. But set up those times to do that. And if you don't have a Zoom account already, you can do a Zoom account for free. And if it's just you and one other person, there's no limit on that amount of time. But I encourage you to not take up their whole day with it either. But you can set up that Zoom account for free and have one-on-one or a group of up to 100 or if it's less than 40 minutes. So think about the people that you know. Well, who should they meet? Is there anybody in their world, when you're making these connections, who should they meet? Because again, that's putting the you first mentality, right? Who should they meet? Offer some introductions to people that you think they should meet. You're going to give before you get. Ask permission to peruse. When I say this, I mean, for me, LinkedIn is still by far the best business networking, social media platform out there. And so I'm going to refer to LinkedIn most often. But go peruse somebody's LinkedIn contacts, their connections on there. And obviously you don't need to have permission. But the reason I encourage you to ask permission to peruse their network is because what it's doing is, one, it's being thoughtful. And it's also telling them that, oh, This person is really looking to connect with new people. And so what that does, it plants in their brain this thought, and it gets their reticular activator working so that when they think of somebody, they'll think, oh, well, this person was thinking about people they want to connect with. So let me see if I can make that introduction. So ask permission to peruse and then go check it out and see how you can connect. Ask for introductions with those people that you find interesting that might make a good connection for you. So who's at the online networking event? Chamber's doing a lot of these. Everybody's doing a lot of these. And I know sometimes we'll get the contacts depending on the event. We might know who it is and their email addresses. But if you don't, take some notes as you're here. Kind of check out the videos of people that are here. Write down their name and connect with them later on. See if you can reach out to them and maybe connect on LinkedIn. And I don't encourage it all the time, especially not this morning. But you could even send them a private chat message during the event and say, hey, would it be okay if I connect with you later on, and connect on LinkedIn? But again, I don't encourage that for this morning's event for obvious reasons. Post your own original content. So if you can expand your presence on LinkedIn by putting your own content out there. Plenty of people do a lot of sharing of posts, and that's all good. But when you can post your own original content out there, then people get to know you, how you think and how you feel and how your mind works. And so the more that you can do that, then you're creating an identity for yourself out there. And then when you do that, do your post, put it up on LinkedIn, and then send a link to that post to people that you're already connected with, that you think that they might find it relevant, because it tells them that you're thinking about them, and that's important. Then increase your social media interaction. When you're on LinkedIn or there are groups, get into LinkedIn groups and find groups that you're interested in that are good for your industry, that are important to you. And get in those groups and then start interacting with those. Comment on people's posts and connect with those people. You already have a common interest, so connect with them, and spend that time to do that. It does take some time, but it's not forever. And then going back to Zoom coffee breaks, hold Zoom coffee breaks with groups. Small groups, medium-sized groups, but hold them with groups and be the connector. What I don't encourage you to do is to have Zoom coffee breaks and everybody already knows everybody. Always make sure and invite at least one person to that group that you can introduce to the others. Somebody that you think that would be a good fit. Fun. Because networking doesn't come naturally for a lot of people, and it can be kind of hard and challenging, but have some fun with it, because it is fun, and it can be. But you have to. It's the human side of it that's fun, and it can be kind of challenging. When you have conflict, when you think of conflict, and we're going to go back to the chat window again, so I'll ask for your participation. When the idea of conflict comes up, what feelings does it arouse in you? What does it stir up inside you when you think of conflict? Put a few words, a comment in there about what the thought of conflict does for you. Hey, Ken, was that an answer from the earlier? Anxiety, tension, negative, yes. Stress, desire to resolve it. How can I avoid it? Fear. Mm-hmm. Solution, find it, fixing, opportunity to resolve, trying to determine problem way forward, opportunity. Ah, good, Gary. Why can't they see my view? Yeah, John, right? We want to say, what's wrong with them? Fixing, yeah, we like to fix it. Yeah, when we have conflict, we want to solve the conflict. And how can I avoid it? Man, Doug, a lot of people like to do that. Look for solutions. What did I do wrong? Ah, good, Larry. Taking accountability. Nice, good responses. Yeah, so conflict is challenging, and so everybody has their own feeling about conflict and how do they respond to it, and it can be difficult. The thing I know is that, even though it's bad and it's not fun, it doesn't always have to be a negative thing. It's how we approach it and what our mindset is about it. Well, look at conflict. It's two or more people disagree or in a struggle about something. Strong emotions come into play. Again, we're bringing those emotions back in: anxiety, resentment, frustration, anger, hurt feelings, and then high stakes may be involved. It could be a job, a relationship, or somebody hurt me, or somebody did something bad to me, or it can be so many things that the stakes are involved. It affects your job and your marriage and personal relationships that you have. So it's difficult. One of the tools that we use in our training is the DISC behavioral model, and most of you have probably heard something about DISC. And DISC is it's a model that shows people, that helps people understand about their behavior and their personality style, and it also helps them understand about others. So what happens is when we do the assessments and somebody does the assessment, they're going to have a dot that shows up somewhere on this map that's going to show them, tell the story about them. It creates like an owner's manual for them about themselves, understanding themselves, and then how do they negotiate and deal with others that have different styles or with similar styles. And when we do that, we have this new awareness about our interactions. And so on the conflict side of it here, when we do this conflict session with groups, they learn how to better do conflict with other people. So you see in this map here, this is a really nice, simple map here. So if somebody is over here in this I style over here, then you can see what their productive tendencies are. They communicate empathy, encourages open dialogue, and so forth. But then you see up in the outer where it talks about their destructive tendencies, the things that make it challenging, and if they don't do conflict right, what does that look like to them? And when you look at their positive tendencies and compare it to somebody across on the other side, on the C side, well, they want to find the root of the problem, sort out the issues. They're really about that gives people space. Where the person with the I style, they want to be around people, they want to get emotions involved, and the C person does not. But their destructive tendencies for that C person are defensiveness, and they get passive aggressive, and they get critical. They isolate themselves, so they're isolating themselves. So they're the total opposite of what that I style would want to be, where they want to provide reassurance, and they want to work it out now, because it upsets them. So everybody has their own style on how they work with this, and the problem is that when we have unhealthy behaviors and conflict, then that conflict is not going to be resolved, and it's going to continue to fester and stew. And so that's what's in our control, as to how we choose our behavior. And the more that we know and understand about our behavior, then the better we can handle and navigate the conflict. But when people do it differently, sometimes we look at their behavior as confusing. Who was it that said, why don't they see things the way I do? Yeah, and so we look at behavior as maybe it's confusing, it's counterproductive, might be weird or bizarre, but it's just a different approach to handling conflict. And a lot of it just depends on how they're wired. And this is what the DISC map does, is it shows people how they're wired, what their tendencies are, their preferences. And because we have tendencies and preferences, and we're all going to be a little bit different, we're going to react differently. So what we're going to take just a brief look at today is it's not about conflict resolution. That's a whole other workshop on its own. But we're talking about just improving awareness around conflict behaviors. And this is also another one we spend a lot of several hours on. But we'll just take a quick overview today for this. So some of the keystone principles that we have is that conflict is inevitable. If you're around people, there's nothing you can do to avoid it. It's part of relationships, but it can also be productive. And then your interactions may be influenced by other factors. Those other factors being in an organization, it might be the hierarchy. Your interactions with somebody that's higher on the chart than you are, probably going to be different. Might be, not necessarily. Depends on how you handle it. But the organizational or cultural factors, the business atmosphere, personal experiences that we have, and our own history and our mindset around conflict. If we've been brought up where conflict is always just this raging, screaming, negative thing, then our natural tendency is going to be to back off and avoid conflict at all costs. Or we may be of a style like the D style in the map that says, you know what, I like conflict because I know with conflict, then we have resolution and then we get to the end, because they're very results driven. So a lot of the folks with the D style are very driven, and they're good about it. They want to have conflict. They don't back off from it at all. But they have to be conscious of the people that are opposite of them on the S part of the map that say, you know what, I prefer to not have conflict. If we can avoid it, I'd avoid it. I'd rather just work it out without having the conflict and get things getting a little bit hairy. But the other principle, we can only control our own response. we can't change anybody. We can't do anything to make anybody different or behave differently. Going back to our emotional intelligence, we can affect their emotions and we can influence their emotions, but we can't control them. And then having a better understanding of our own styles and how we behave and what our challenges are in conflict leads us to a better approach. And when we work with an in-place team, this is when this is really valuable, because it's good if I know, if I understand and have the awareness, it's helpful to me and it's helpful to the people that are around me. But it's a lot of work. If the people around me have the same awareness of their styles and my style and how the challenges that we have and how we react under pressure, when they have that awareness, instead of me always reaching out and doing all the work, we're meeting in the middle. And so the conflict becomes easier to handle, and we have a different approach to it because I'm adapting my approach to this person because I know their style, I know what's important to them and what their preferences are, so I can change my approach to adapt to them, and they can do the same. So it takes a lot of the pressure off. When we have conflict, things that happen, we have these thoughts that we have that we refer to as automatic thoughts, and think of it as it's almost a trigger. So you have the conflict, which actually triggers the automatic thought, and the automatic thought is really, it's the story that we're telling ourselves. So somebody says something, does something, and I have this story that I tell myself instantly, and somebody interrupts me, and I think, well, they're being rude, they don't respect me, and they're trying to talk me down. And so you've had this automatic thought, and then you have this destructive response. And so everybody has different destructive responses depending on their style. You may just retaliate right away. You may back off. You may get passive aggressive. You may get sarcastic. There's a lot of different things that can happen. But that destructive response takes that situation, that conflict that you're having right now, instead of making it where it's workable and that we can deal with it, you can put this destructive response in there, and then all of a sudden you have this stress and this pressure that doesn't need to be there. So there's something that we have to do between that conflict and the response. It's that whole, the space between stimulus and response. It's a pretty short amount of time, but we get to choose what happens. And we have the automatic thoughts, but what can we do differently than that? And so some of the automatic responses that we might have, the destructive responses, we have passive aggression, gossiping. And if you look at this list, you may find your default when you get in those situations. What is it that I do when somebody upsets me, when somebody ticks me off, and I feel like that they're not being fair to me, they're not being right? What is my default response? And depending on what your behavior and personality style is, you'll see that in here, because if it's on the right side column, overpowering, that's going to be somebody that's probably on that D style, that very direct person, that driving person. But then the caving in might be that some on the left side column could be somebody that's in that S style, the one that the person doesn't want any conflict. They'd rather just give in. The belittling might be that D style, arguing, sarcasm. So we've had different ways of going about it, and what our destructive responses are. Exaggerating the problem. That's probably going to be that person with that S style, because their emotions get caught up. They get not the S style, the I style. Their emotions tend to get caught up, and they'll make more out of it than it should be. The mountain out of a molehill kind of thing. So you'll see, you can probably identify yourself somewhere in here. What is your default response? The destructive response. So what do? We change our response. We have the conflict. We have the automatic thought, because there's not a lot that we can do about that automatic thought. It's there. So it comes in, but then what can we do instead of that destructive response? Well, first, we've got to step back. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, you got to pause. You got to take a breath a minute, step back, and then reframe it. Did they really mean to do that? Again, going back to what I said earlier about the normal person that isn't doing this just to make my day bad, to make a bad situation, because if there's a conflict and it's a bad situation, it's not bad just for me, it's bad for them too. So they're not their intention is generally not to cause this conflict. So how can I step back and then reframe it and then come up with a better response to this conflict? I hope that makes sense. So when we want to navigate the minefield, and it is a minefield because it's dicey out there, because it's not, we can have the best plan in place, and if somebody doesn't want to play along with our plan to navigate this conflict and deal with it in a productive way, it doesn't matter too much what what we do if they don't want to play along with us. But the important thing is that, you know, you choose your battles carefully. If you feel like you have to win all the time and always be right and always prove to everybody that you're right, that can be exhausting. And it's a no-win situation. And so you're setting yourself up for failure, and it's just going to be, it's just awful, you know, because you're not going to be happy. You're never going to win. So ask questions to understand the other's perspective. Again, that's going back to what we were talking about with the communication. You know, how do we see things from their side? Because you know, we're in this conflict. I have my perspective, but I have to understand that they have theirs, and they're not a bad person. They just see it differently than I do. So how can I find out more about why they are where they are? So don't make assumptions. Don't make assumptions that they are trying to railroad you, that they're trying to get one over on you. Don't make those assumptions, and then listen. Really, really listen, because we know what fake listening looks like, where you're listening and you're saying, yeah, just finish what you're saying, because then I'm going to tell you what the real truth is, and I'll be right. Don't do that. So when appropriate, decide on what the next steps are. And that depends on what the situation is. If it's in a work situation and you are, you've got to move on and resolve this, and that goes into the resolution. The conflict resolution is, what are those next steps that each of us are going to be responsible for, and that we're going to hold each other accountable for as well. Okay, so I've got time. I think I'm good on time. There was something I wanted to include today, and I wasn't sure if I would have the time. So I'm going to go ahead and add those slides in here. So stand by just one moment. Are there any questions or comments along the way so far that anybody would like to throw into the chat window?
Yeah, feel free, folks that are on the line, to enter questions in as we're going along, and as we see those pop up, we'll either ask those as they're pertinent, or we'll hold them to the end, one or the other. So feel free to type those questions in, and we'll get to them as we can. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, looks like we'll have a little time for some Q&A at the end. So we talked a little bit more. I wanted to spend a little bit more time on this DISC model to see if I can help you understand a little bit what that looks like. This is a 4-quadrant model, and there's some different variations of this. Also, you've probably seen one that's just colors, or there's one with animals and some different things. But it's really a helpful tool to really help us understand ourselves and create some awareness about ourselves. And when we do an assessment, it's an online assessment that we have people do, and it asks them probably 50 to 60 questions or so, but we're really not asking 50 to 60 questions. We're asking them really what's a couple of different questions. We're asking them, on this north-south axis here, what's your are you more fast-paced and outspoken, or are you more cautious and reflective? And then on the east-west axis, we're asking them, are you more skeptical and questioning, or are you more warm and accepting and more people-focused on the right side? And we give those geographic directions also. So we talk about the people from the north, that they tend to walk fast, talk fast, eat fast, and they're more driven, they're more fast-paced and outspoken. Where the folks that are in the south, they're more cautious and reflective, and they're more moderate-paced, and they're not in such a rush, and they're not as, it's not that they're not as goal-oriented, but they just have a different way of going about it. And then the folks that are on the west, they're more questioning and skeptical. They tend to be more task-focused as opposed to people-focused. They are more challenging and tend to be more direct. And the folks that are on the east side are more accepting and warm. They are more people-focused as opposed to task-focused. Not that they're not task-focused, but it's more important. The priority for them is the people, to make sure that everybody is involved and having the input that they want to have. And so once we have we do the assessment, then it's going to place the person's dot somewhere within this map, and that way we'll get a feel for where they are. And so those are the questions that we're asking them. And so I'll ask you all to think about this yourself. So we have a group of people, and this is actually this group, just so you know. We have this group of people, and so we'll ask people, and we'll do this and when we do a live session, we actually get into a big room like this, a big room, and get people to move about the room into the 4 corners of the room to indicate the 4 quadrants of the DISC model. And so we'll ask people, are you more fast-paced and outspoken, or are you more cautious and reflective? And then we've already divided the group up that way. And then we'll ask them, well, the
So
same
Bruce,
group, are you more, yes?
So these are questions that we could be asking ourselves right now and writing those down, right?
I'd love for you to be doing that right now. So ask yourself that. Yeah. So are you more fast-paced and outspoken, or you consider yourself more cautious and reflective? And so think about that right now. Where are you with that? And then the same questions, same group is we want to know is, are you more questioning and skeptical, or do you tend to be more accepting and warm? And most of us can identify ourselves in one of those, in each of those. And then once we do that, are we more in the north, or are we more in the south, or more in the west, or more in the east? And then we can divide up the group even more. So we take this group and say, if you're more fast-paced and outspoken, but you're more questioning and skeptical, then that's going to put you up in that D quadrant. But then if you're also still fast-paced and outspoken, but you're more accepting and warm, then it's going to put you into that I quadrant. So you're still fast-paced and outspoken, but you're more on the people side of it, more people-focused as opposed to task-focused. And again, we'll divide up the group, the people that are also accepting and warm, but they're more cautious and reflective, more moderate pace. They're not as fast-paced as the folks up north. Those are going to end up in the S quadrant. And then again, the cautious and reflective folks that are also more questioning and skeptical, they'll end up down in the D quadrant. And so we'll do that in a room, and there's more involved with it, and we'll do more of a breakdown of the whole DISC model, and we'll have videos that we'll be able to watch. But it really helps people understand why they are the way they are. So when you have the people that are in the C style, those are your more down in that southwest quadrant. Those are the more analytical. You'll find a lot of people that are accountants and engineers that are in that place. They're very analytical and accurate, and they're more reserved. They don't like surprises. They want to be everything to be well thought out. They love a good spreadsheet, and where you take that person that's up on the opposite side of that, in that I quadrant, the fast-paced and outspoken and accepting and warm, if you put a spreadsheet and a stack of binders in front of them, they're just going to lose their mind, because they'll just slide it off to the side. It'll never be looked at. But they really are more about the people. Then they want more people involved, and who can we talk and who can we invite, and if you want to have somebody to plan your party, that I style is the person you want to have plan your party, because it's going to be a good party. It'll probably be over budget, but it'll be great. But it's a good group. And the thing that we go through these styles, and we want to make sure that everybody understands that whether you're a D, an I, an S, or a C, there's no style that's better than the other, and we're all a blend of all the styles. Because somebody might say, I might be more in that S style, but there are times that I'm really analytical, or I'm really driven, because what this is it's about our default setting. When everything's just kind of normal, this is where I am, and we can all do all those other things. We flex to those other places on the map, but then when we come back home, this is my home base. So there's no style that's better than the others, and it's not about labeling people. We never want to label people, and we always try to refer to it as, this is a person with a C style or a person with an S style, instead of saying, well, that person's a D or that person's an I. It's not about labeling them and pigeonholing them and saying, well, this is how they are, because people that will tend to do that, especially if they're a hiring manager or a hiring position, they will say, well, for this job, I can only have this style, and that's just not accurate, because there are some people that will say, I only want people with a D style to be in my sales force. Okay, and I knew a guy like that who was a really high D style, really out on the edge of D style, and he said he was a sales manager. He said the only salespeople I hire are other D styles just like me. So he wants a bunch of mini-me's working for him. But the problem is, and I told him this, I said, well, that's great. Are all of your customers a D style? And of course they're not. So the approach to that D style can be off-putting to somebody that's complete opposite side of the map from them. And they may not even be aware of it and know how to adapt their approach to that person. So it's about having the knowledge. And so somebody that's an S style or C style, they can be really great salespeople, but their approach is going to be different. But when they can also identify what's on the other side and what that person's style is, they can adapt their approach. So that C style, who might not normally be outgoing and really high energy type person, that person can adapt for a period of time. But if you put them in a social environment where they're constantly having to be around people and do a lot of happy hours and things like that, they're not going to be comfortable. It's exhausting to them after a while, and so they're always going to retreat back to their home base, and we all do that. So, but it's a great exercise to go through. So, and the more that a working team does this and it becomes part of the culture, then they start to really understand how it is. And we have cards that people will put on their cubicle. I guess we probably won't have cubicles anymore. I don't know how that's all going to play out, but to tell people, this is my style and this is how best to deal with me. These are the things that challenge me. So it helps us to be better at working with other folks. So just tying it all up and putting it together, the deeper connections that we all want to have, and we need to make those deep connections, doing conflict better, and networking in this virtual or in real life kind of world, it all ties together, and it requires us to get better at building these strong relationships and enhancing our emotional intelligence. So the more that we can work on these, and like I said, that emotional intelligence is something we can work on, and we can develop it and build it and be better at it. We can work on it and be better. So it all ties in together. And I'd love for people to think about one action that you'll take based on what we talked about today. Just one. Just if you have 2 or 3, that's awesome. But just if you take one action that you walk away from this and say, I'm going to do this. So for the next week or month or whatever, I'm going to do this and get better at that. And if you wanted to put that in the chat, I'd love to hear about that. And I'm happy to take whatever questions we have at this time.
Yeah, Bruce, thank you. We do have a couple questions in the chat. So first from Mr. Maters. Do you have any sample exercises for managing conflict?
Sample exercises. Not like, I guess you'd be asking about I'd have to say no, I don't really have like a sample exercise. No, I don't.
So, Mr. Maters, do you want to expand on that a little bit, or is that kind of what you were?
So what I was curious about is if you had, I don't know, if you had a situation that you wanted to practice with somebody, or if you had somebody you wanted to build a relationship with that that's been soured, what would be some things that you could do to help build that back, kind of restore trust?
Sure.
Manage that conflict.
Yeah, so that is a really good question. So one thing that we do, and again, it doesn't really apply to this group because we haven't gone through that process, but with the assessments that we do, it gives the product I use. There's a number of different disc products. The product I use is called Everything Disc that Wiley Publishing does out of Minneapolis, and once somebody has done that assessment, they have access to their website that's called myeverythingdisc.com, and so we encourage the teams when they're working together to go to that website, because what that does, it creates, they have like a little dashboard for themselves where they can learn more about it, but it also gives them an opportunity to do comparisons. So they do comparisons between 2 different people, and it prints out a full report about the differences and the similarities that you have and the challenges that you might have in your relationship. And then we encourage people to sit down with those and walk through those reports and see and help them to understand each other a little bit better. If you could do the same thing without that report, if you have that situation where you're willing to be honest, because the problem is that when you're in that conflict situation, that people are hesitant to let their guard down because they're kind of worked up already. And so sometimes it might take a third party to sit with them and just talk them through. It's not a counseling session or anything, but it's about talking through what it is, and you're just sharing the perspective, because when you're in the heat of that moment, a lot of times our emotions have blocked out, it's hijacked everything, and it doesn't allow rational conversation. So when things cool down, if you're willing to do it, then you sit down with that person and you just talk. You have to talk through it, and I encourage in those situations, it's probably better to have another person involved in the conversation.
Thanks, Bruce. And I think that kind of answers Anthony's question as well. He says, I often encounter defensiveness as an impediment to resolving conflict in the workplace. Do you have an effective strategy for moving beyond defensiveness and managing conflict?
Yeah, I think that really, it's defensiveness is a choice. That's one of those responses that we have that are not so great, the defensiveness. And so it's about an awareness thing. So somebody has to decide and make that choice as to what is their response going to be. And if somebody doesn't have that awareness, they think that they're just being who they are and they're being normal. And the challenge is that, and when we go through these sessions, we tell people that to say that that's just who I am. And that's how I was made. Take me the way I am, take it or leave it. That's okay. If that's the way you want to be, that's okay, I guess. But man, oh man, it's going to be such a miserable existence. So you have to be willing to look at your situation and your responses and say, man, that's not productive. It's not
beneficial.
Bruce,
I have a follow-up question on that.
Yeah.
you know, I've had a lot of situations where I've tried to resolve conflict in the workplace, and I do find defensiveness on the part of the people you're talking to try and find a solution is a real impediment. And I've tried saying, look, nobody's in trouble. We're just trying to find out a good solution to an issue that has arisen. So just be as open and honest as you can. And there's nobody's going to run to somebody and complain. And it's very, very difficult to get beyond that. People are afraid of being honest in case it redounds to their disadvantage. And it's so really, I was trying to think, is there a good strategy for putting somebody at ease where they don't feel they have to be defensive, and then they can be part of an effort to resolve a problem?
Yeah, it takes time because there's trust issues there, and so if somebody doesn't have the trust, they're not going to be open and vulnerable. So I think a lot of times it takes because what you're asking them to be is to be vulnerable and to be honest. And I think a lot of times it takes an example for you to do it first. If there's a way that you can show them that you're letting your guard down, even though it might not be up like theirs is with the fangs out and everything, but if you can demonstrate what you're looking for from them, I think that's helpful.
Rodolfo put a comment in here. He says, if someone is angry and or upset, we need to stay calm, firm, and show an understanding of the feelings of that angry party. I think, if you do the opposite, that just can escalate the situation, which is just going to make it worse.
Absolutely. You need to acknowledge and honor the feelings that they have because they're theirs and they're real. And if you tell somebody, well, first thing, don't tell them to calm down because that never works. But if you tell somebody that, well, you're overreacting, what you're feeling is wrong, and if you tell somebody that what they're feeling is wrong, you're telling them that they're wrong and that there's something's wrong with them, and they're just going to continue to get more defensive, and it escalates. Absolutely.
Yeah, so I want to shift gears here a little bit. Corolla Broadus asked, so as far as LinkedIn goes, do you recommend LinkedIn Pro?
No, I don't think you need to do that. I've done that, and I paid them a lot of money, and I didn't get nearly the benefit out of it that I wanted.
I think Pro is a little more for recruiting and stuff like that, right?
I think there's three different categories of a premium account in there. So one is more sales motivated or sales oriented, and one more for recruiting. Yeah, so it depends on what it is, but yeah, you choose the one. But it's fairly expensive, I think, and I think to do just good networking, I don't think it's that important.
Okay. Any other questions from the group? I think I've caught all of the ones. Okay, I missed one here. Tony had another question. Have you thought about taking out the word destructive? Could you say unproductive as an alternative to productive? That was.
I haven't thought about that, but I mean, it's certainly something that could be done. I
think that goes along with the conflict resolution type thing, is using kind of softer verbiage, if you will.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If a person wants to look at it, is it in non-productive or destructive either way? I mean, yeah, destructive is certainly a negative word, but those responses are really negative responses as well. So for me, it's kind of like calling it as it is.
Well, I guess the reason I asked the question is that I don't like putting labels on people. I don't know whether I'm a D, an I, an S, or a C. I'm probably a mixture of all of them. But if you start giving somebody a label and put it on their cubicle, then there's a tendency to associate the destructive tendencies with the productive tendencies, and I just think it's unproductive to use destructive language in describing the way people act, because as you said, they can't always help it, but they can use strategies to overcome it. And I just think putting labels on people is destructive in itself, because what you're really concerned about is the actions, not the character of the person.
For sure, and to be clear, Tony, and that's a great point. But to be clear, anything that we would have somebody, the cards that we give people that they use is not that first one that we saw with the destructive and those things, those descriptors on there. It is just that disc map, shows where their dot is on it, and shows the things that ways to work with me.
Okay, thanks.
But yeah, the way we don't like to label people, and we always encourage them to not label.
Excellent. Any additional questions? So if you have any, just go ahead and put them in the chat. We will kind of move forward a little bit here with a couple other things. I was remiss at the beginning in thanking our sponsor, Weaver, who's the sponsor of the Small Business Committee, and is the main sponsor of all the different Small Business Committee that we do, including the one that we're on right now, the Networking Skills Workshop. So also wanted to introduce Ken Malcolmson. He's the CEO and president of the North Dallas Chamber of Commerce. So Ken, I know there's some great things upcoming on the calendar. So I wanted to see if you wanted to kind of talk a little bit about those and kind of do your kind of thank you to everybody for showing up and whatnot. So Ken.
Well, first and foremost, thank you, Bruce. Amazing. I've got about 2 pages worth of notes here. I'm hopeful that you might be willing to share some of your slides, if not all of them, with some of us, because it's a first-class presentation. About a year and a half ago, Corolla and I actually teamed up on a networking skills workshop. And we covered a lot of the ground, not a lot, but some of the ground that Bruce covered today. But Corolla, with all due respect, I thought we did a masterful job, but Bruce clearly superseded us. So thank you very much, Bruce. They're very insightful comments, very insightful perspectives, and it really makes one think about how they can better communicate, network, and engage. So
Thank you, Ken.
Bruce, very, very much.